Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Over the Net. We'll talk a little bit in detail why we got a smaller crew, but for right now, I am Dylan Heinrich. I am the volleyball reporter for Rock Am Nation. This is my first year on the beat, but I've been following the team all 3 years I've been here, so it's I'm excited that we have our own actual show that's not just an interview series, which was pioneered by Matthew, who we'll talk in a sec. I also do softball and women's basketball, but those are out of season, long gone. But for right now, I'm excited to talk a lot of volleyball.
And I'm Matthew Gustafson, the volleyball reporter emeritus at Rock M, a.k.a. the former volleyball beat writer, now over to the football and men's basketball beat.
So, as you notice, the crew is a little bit smaller again. For Colin Simmons has food poisoning, so wish him all the best. We definitely are. And then it's a little too late at night for Karen to be joining us as well, which, I get it. We're all getting old, so I should probably cut that, but that's okay. Anywho, it's just Matthew and I.
I recently found out there's at least one player in Major League Baseball who's younger than I am, so
gosh,
that was an interesting moment. But anyways, let's talk about volleyball.
Yes, the baseball talk is for another day. We are going to be talking some Mizzou Volleyball. They went 2-2 on the week with losses to teams that are now top 10 in Stanford and TCU, while knocking the socks off of Wyoming, Rhode Island. We'll briefly go over those games because there's not much to say. We played a lot of the backups. Asia Harvey got some real good minutes. Grace O'Reilly looked good. Nina Mandovich also looked very solid. Didn't drop a set. Beat the brakes off some pretty bad teams. Anything to add from your end, Matthew?
Nope, not really. I mean, they did what they needed to do. You could tell that they were confident about those matches because the stats were interesting if you look at the kill leaders for some of those matches, not who you would expect, and that's because they were able to get some players in, get some playing time for people who aren't going to be centerpieces of this team, but have been role players in the past or could be starters in the future. So you could tell they were confident about those two matches, and then obviously you had the two big games against Stanford, TCU. Didn't go their way, but they looked pretty impressive in both.
Starting with that Stanford match, this happened on Tuesday. In the Hearn Center, of course, the SEC-ACC Challenge. Stanford takes the win 3-1. They win the first set 25-23, the second set 33-31. Mizzou avoids the sweep, winning the third set 25-22. Eventually falls 25-21. This was an interesting match on multiple accounts. Stanford just could not serve the ball over the net. They had more service errors than I think I've seen in my entire life. I believe it was 20, give or take. It was pretty close. I think Mizzou played them very closely. I know we're going to get into some more specific details here, but as you noticed, none of those sets, every one of them, they got to 20. Of course, there was the marathon second set that went 33-31. So the Tigers lose in 4, but Matthew, there's a lot to be encouraged about coming out of this performance.
Yeah, 23 service errors to be exact. I just looked it up. And to me, I feel like if you win that second set, you're talking about an entirely different match. Number one, you still win set 3. You've got 2 sets to win one more and get the upset. And we're talking about a very, very good Stanford team here. They were ranked right around the top 5 entering the season and the preseason poll, and for good reason. They've got their 3 starting hitters returning, including a first-team All-American in Elia Rubin, and you saw the impact of those hitters during that match. But Mizzou overall did a very good job. I think the offense looked really good. And you saw the team make some incredible saves. The back row defense was very impressive against Stanford. Made some, like I said, incredible saves. Not only Maya Sand, but everybody else on the team. And that's really an indicator to me of some of the top teams have incredible defense and are able to make some insane saves and then transition effectively to offense as well. And we saw that the talent for this team is there. There are some things they're going to need to do and be more consistent at to unlock that talent. Number one is the blocking. I think you saw a lot of open looks for Stanford in that match, whether that was because you had the 2 blockers for Mizzou who are too far apart when the Stanford hitter ended up hitting it over the net, and so they were able to force it through that gap. You had them able to control where they were hitting the ball, hit high hands, get the deflection off of the Mizzou blocker, hit it what is called a tool block, which is where you hit it off of the block and it goes out of bounds. That's a tool block, so you're able to see them tool the block often as well. So Mizzou's blocking obviously is going to need to improve if they want to match up against these elite teams like Stanford, like TCU, like Texas and Texas A&M when they get into conference play. You also saw some issues with serve receive for Mizzou. When Stanford did get it over the net, sometimes Mizzou really struggled to get into system. They allowed some balls to fall to the floor, and that really held back their offense at times. I think those are two key issues that you're going to be looking at. And then offensively in Stanford, the match, overall it was fairly good. TCU, the offense slowed down a bit, and you're seeing just a lack of consistency right now compared to last season. Mizzou was one of the best offenses in the country last year, and right now they just aren't at that same level. They can get there, but they're going to need more consistent performances and performances at a higher level from some of the players on the court.
100%. We'll stick with the Stanford match for a little bit. You talked about that Stanford attack just being so potent. That all-important second set, Stanford hit .526. Mizzou hit .400 that set, which is really darn good. But when your opponent has 24 kills and is hitting over 500, you're not going to win a lot of those sets. Talking a little bit about the defense, of course, Maya Sands led the way, 16 digs, but Zoe Matias-Lopez, ZML, my early MVP for the team. She hasn't been the most valuable, but my goodness, she's made an impact. 15 digs against the top 5 Stanford team. Really darn good. You talk about the consistency. Kaylin Alexander has been good for these first couple of them, but she hasn't made the same impact as Michael Vernon and Jordan Iliff in this game. 15 kills, 8 airs on 46 attacks for a 1.52. She led the team in total kills, and there's nothing to scarf at, but when you're looking at someone who is an honorable All-American, someone who needs to be the number one option on a Sweet 16 team, it's not quite what you're looking for.
And that's the thing. Alexander looked really good the opening weekend. She's hit below 200 each match since then, so I think that's the last 4 in a row. You're talking about somebody who, like you mentioned, was an honorable mention All-American last year, was the Big West Player of the Year at Hawaii, and somebody who was in the top 5 in the nation in kills per set. You expected her to come in here and be the leader of this offense, and I still think that she will be, but right now seems like she's either getting acclimated to the offense or in a little bit of a slump. Either way, you really need her to get out of that slump by the time that you reach SEC play, because the offense needs her to be that number one option. There is some signs of encouragement on the offense. I think in that Stanford match, Janet Demery looked really good, and specifically, she was very effective at using a variety of different shots, because you have in volleyball, obviously, sometimes you're just going to hit it as hard as possible, right? But like I said, you can tool it off the block. You can go high hands, which is where you target the very top of somebody's hands, try to get it off of the fingertips and get the tip and get the kill that way. You can also do a tip shot where you tip it over, you kind of off-speed that change-up where you get it over the block and it just kind of just dives down over the block, and she was doing that really effectively. That's something we haven't really seen from her in previous years. Also used the roll shot once or twice, another sort of an off-speed hit, kind of a change-up. So to see her use those and use those effectively was a very encouraging sign, and I think increases the ceiling of this offense. But for the offense to reach, I think, the base level that we were expecting, number one, you need Alexander to get back to the level she was at last year. And number two, there seems to be a little bit of a lingering battle at that right side position. You saw Grace O'Reilly enter in the third set for Kamani Johnson, who had previously had the leg up in that competition. And Mizzou played really well in that set. And I think O'Reilly especially was effective for the team's defense with the blocking, I think was where she had a big impact. And you saw that in the TCU match where there doesn't seem to be a clear number one option at right side right now. That is something that you also have to figure out sooner rather than later if you're going to accomplish what this team wants to do.
Like you said, having that starting rotation figured out by SEC play, which we'll talk about in a minute, will be important. While we're also sticking on the attacks, I want to give a huge shout out to the middles in the game. Tyra Ariel and Reagan Haith both hit over 500 with double-digit kills. Ariel finished with 13 kills on a 750 hitting percentage. 13 kills on 16 total attacks. Bananas. Just a elite level offense from both of them, and Ariel also was a standout in the TCU game, which we'll get to in a little bit, but just the middles have been so effective for this team offensively. You just want to see them pick it up defensively with the blocking.
Yeah, the middles, I mean, it's been like that all year long. Both of them are incredibly efficient right now. Reagan Haith, offensively, is playing at just the next level. She's taken a massive jump from last year. Tyra Ariel is having probably the best offensive year so far of her career. That's the case for both of them. And I think that you were expecting a lot offensively out of your middles entering the season. You weren't expecting this. They have been lights out all year long. And that's one of the reasons I'm still encouraged by this offense. I think that, again, given what you've seen from the middles, given what you saw in that Stanford match from Demaray, if you can get Alexander back on track, you can figure out your starter at right side, you're talking about a team that should have a very good offense. Now it's just about how can they get to that point, and how soon, if they get to that point, can they get there?
Like you said, the clock is ticking. Last thing I think I will mention about this Stanford match, you might have some more thoughts, but Karen is not here, but as she is gracious enough to remind us that everybody watches women's sports, especially on the Mizzou side. It was the 5th most watched regular season volleyball game in ESPN history, especially with this happening at 8:30 Central Time, 9:30 on the East Coast. Those sort of numbers are crazy. The sport of volleyball just continues to grow, and I'm glad that Mizzou is a part of the renaissance and, again, gets to have these moments like ESPN being broadcast from the Hearn Center. You were there, Matthew, obviously, the student section. Pretty loud, pretty boisterous, especially for those first couple sets.
Yeah, I think I've talked about it before. Hearn Center, when you have a really good crowd, and it was a good crowd against Stanford. I've seen it be better. Florida last year was probably the best that I've ever seen Hearns, but at its best, Hearn Center is one of the best environments in college volleyball. And I say that as somebody who has been to Nebraska, been to TCU, has been to Pitt, been to Creighton, some of these really good teams that are consistently up there, or in the last few years have been up there in the world of college volleyball. And outside of Nebraska, which, believe me, is no shade to Mizzou, because Nebraska is undoubtedly the best environment in college volleyball, Mizzou has been the best one. So Hearn Center, when it is even half full, you get 6,000-7,000 people in there. That wasn't intentional, Dylan. But anyway, when you get 5,000 to 7,000 people in there and the crowd is into it, it is incredibly loud. That is an incredibly tough place to play. And that is something that you've seen. That's one of the reasons why Mizzou was very, very good at home last season. And I think something that we'll have to keep an eye on for the rest of this year. If Mizzou is in a good spot late in the season, you've got that Kentucky match, a match which could be very, very big, not only for the SEC standings, but also for your tournament resume. So if Mizzou's competitive at that point, I think that's a crowd that you could see be absolutely electric.
The official crowd for the Stanford match was just over 3,000. A good bit of that was in a very packed student section, which is always probably going to be your largest contingency, which helps. So while, it wasn't that crazy 6,000 or 7,000 crowd that you saw at the Florida game, it was absolutely a deafening environment, especially early on before people started to file out as the clock turned past 10 o'clock. So I think when you talk about that Kentucky match, I think there's a lot of... The advantage about the SEC is it plays Friday night matches and then Sunday matches. Those Friday night matches, that's what you saw with Florida last year. I don't have the schedule memorized by any means, but I'm sure there will be a couple big time Friday night matches. I think Oklahoma's on a Friday. They will draw some pretty darn good crowds. I am certain of it, especially when Hearn Center is rocking on those Friday nights.
Yeah, Mizzou, when Joshua Taylor is not the head coach after COVID, has consistently been among the top 20 to 25 in the nation in attendance. And you saw last year they broke 3,000 per match in attendance for the second time in program history. This is a team that obviously has a lot of preseason expectations. And given that you're starting out for an 8:30 match for, as we know, Olympic sports, usually you get a lot of students, and then you tend to have a lot of people who are a little bit older, compared to like an average football or basketball crowd. So because of that, not so much for the students, but for everybody else, the 8:30 start isn't ideal. So I think that, yeah, if Mizzou bounces back, if they look good during conference play, then you're going to see a really, really good group of fans coming to Hearn Center again this year. And you never know, maybe breaking 3,000 per match for the third time in program history.
I honestly think their numbers might be higher because last year there were a couple more of those filler matches against teams like SEMO, and the entirety of the Mizzou Invitational, which again, they were home, they were on a weekend, but it's some of those lower tier matchups. I remember, I think it was Lindenwood or somebody, it might have been SEMO, but just completely, almost nobody in the stands. Like that's going to tear your numbers down. I don't envision that happening a lot. So I think it's very possible, if not likely, that they stay over 3,000 in almost every match this year. I think it's time that we move on from Stanford and we talk about TCU. Another top 10 team, they entered as number 9. TCU is constantly underranked. So they had a good couple weeks recently, and that included a win against Mizzou. 3-1 once again. TCU wins the first set 32-30. Mizzou wins the second set 32-30, and then Horned Frogs take the last two 25-21. Initial impressions from the match before we get into some of the specifics.
I think, again, you're facing a very, very good team. Stanford is a team that probably has Final Four expectations. TCU right now is probably playing better than any other college volleyball team in the nation. They have gone on this insane streak of top 25 victories. They've taken down some very, very good teams. And playing that team the way they're playing right now in Fort Worth is an incredibly, incredibly tall task. So I think that you're encouraged by what you saw in those first two sets. You battled, right? Mizzou battled 32-30 in back-to-back sets is pure insanity. I mean, that is a marathon of a set. So you see them go back and forth, and then TCU takes over. Again, they're a team that's playing better than basically anybody in the country right now. So I don't think that you're going to necessarily, raise a massive alarm over these two. I think more so those two matches just tell you that this is a very talented team. In fact, the ceiling for this team may be higher than I thought before this week. That being said, they still have a ways to go if they want to get to that point and be one of those top 16, top 8 teams.
100%. I know you talked about the offense both in the Stanford and the TCU match. Started off really strong in those first sets. First set, they hit 302. Second set, you hit 208. Third set, that drops to .077. Fourth set, .171. So as the match kind of wore on, you could see TCU to kind of try to figure out that Mizzou attack. They once again they struggled at the nets. So Mizzou only 8 blocks, TCU 14.5. Once again, this is a TCU team that's bigger. Both their middle blockers are 6'3". I believe Haith is 6'2", and the Inarial is 6'1". So still, the height difference isn't going to play a huge thing, but this has kind of been a staple of Mizzou's teams under the Sullivan era. They've got some good offensively sound middle blockers, but they tend to be on the smaller side of things.
And for Ariel, I think that I've been a bit surprised by the blocking, taking a bit of a step back from last year. Last 2 seasons, she was the leader on USC, a Big Ten team in blocks. And I think last episode we talked about the defensive focus of the Big Ten. So somebody that you expected to come to Mizzou, maybe have more of a defensive impact. You haven't really seen that quite yet. I think that you will see more of a defensive impact as time goes on. But Ariel, 6'1", I think she plays taller than that. Michael Vernon last year was not incredibly tall for a front row player, but she had a massive vertical. So she may have been, I think, 5'11", but she played like she was 6'2". I think Ariel is one of those players where she's 6'1", but she probably plays like she's 6'3" or 6'4". So I think that will pay off eventually. Mizzou is a taller team this year. I think that they're at less of a disadvantage height-wise than they've been the past 2 seasons. That being said, it's still something that they're figuring out, playing those teams with, more height, playing those teams that have more of a presence in the front row, figuring those teams out. How do you be effective defensively, and then making sure that you're being efficient on offense. In that TCU match, you saw the 14.5 blocks for TCU. Part of that's just TCU's got a really good defense, but also the 8, 11, 9 errors in the first 3 sets, respectively, attack errors by Mizzou.
Yeah, like you said, I talked with Coach Sullivan a little bit today, and she said they want to bring those errors down. And so when we're talking attacking errors, Janet Demaray, she's still getting healthy, she's still getting back into it, but finished as the co-leader in kills with Ariel at 16, had 9 errors to go along with it on 40 total attacks, brings her percentage under 200. Kaylin Alexander, 15 kills, 7 errors, also under 200. Grace O'Reilly, 3 kills, 4 errors in the negative hitting percentage. And so these outside hitters, again, the talent is absolutely there, but you can kind of see that everyone is still figuring it out or getting healthy in the case of Janet Demaray, especially as that's kind of been her issue her whole collegiate career. What I've noticed the most, at least, is the accuracy has been a struggle. The power has always been there for her, but it's how can she place that ball, especially against some of these elite teams that have those elite blocks.
And like I mentioned earlier, you talked about the accuracy, consistency has been an issue. Like I said, in that Stanford match, the reason that I think she really stood out was because she was able to be versatile in the way that she was attacking. That's something that we haven't always seen from her. It's been a lot of just kind of hit it as hard as you can. And for some players that works, it's been fairly effective for her. But I think that this year, if she's able to use those other techniques, use those other tools more effectively and more often, then that's going to make her a much more efficient and a much better player offensively.
One player who I do want to give a shout out to in this match was Marina Crownover. Finished with 54 assists, 21 digs for a double-double. Extremely effective player. This is what we've seen. She also had 2 blocks. The senior leadership that Crownover has provided. Not every game has been a home run, but she has always been consistent in the play, especially around these outside hitters that are still kind of getting used to playing with one another and trying to figure out how to get around some of these elite blocks for teams like Stanford and TCU. So Crownover, another great game from her. Not much else to say in my opinion.
Yeah, Crownover, second year with the team, all SEC last year. You mentioned senior leadership. Academically, she's a senior. In terms of this is her 4th year, but she's only redshirt junior, so she does have one more year, which I think is going to be really, really big for this Mizzou team next season. Crownover last year and this year, one of the best setters in the SEC. I think if you're talking about setters, you've got to talk about Caroline Kurt, Tennessee, Crownover, and then Ella Swindle at Texas, and I think those are your top 3. So she's looked really good this year to the point where after last season of her really standing out, is kind of what you've just come to expect, is that she's really good on a night-in, night-out basis.
We talk about that right side position. Grace O'Reilly only saw 1 set of action. Kamani Johnson only saw 2. Paige Felder was seen in 3 separate sets. So this is, again, the freshman getting more experiences, more opportunities. Like you said, that right side position is definitely not set in stone as we barrel on towards SEC play. And if anything, from the Stanford to the TCU match, things got more confusing. So I feel like there are still 3. It's a 3-headed monster. There's still 3 horses left in the race, and so I don't think the Leatherneck Invitational is going to tell us a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if it's very much a decision made behind closed doors, but I will be very interested to see who starts against A&M in about a week. So
yeah, and talking about that Leatherneck Invitational, I believe that is this weekend in Macomb, Illinois. You're going to face Western Illinois. That's the university that is hosting this. And then you're also facing Valparaiso, who's probably going to be the top team that you face in this invitational, team that I believe is currently in the Missouri Valley Conference. It used to be in the Horizon League. They moved over to the Valley a couple years back. And then Chicago State, a team that made the tournament last year, is not going to make the tournament this year. They are, I believe, 0-7. Not sure if they have taken a set all year yet. So you're not too worried about the Leatherneck Invitational. Your focus is going to be that next week when you've got Texas, Texas A&M, 2 top 10 teams. Well, A&M may not be in the top 10 anymore, but they were to begin the year, and I think that they are talent-wise one of the 10 best teams in the nation.
Yeah, we can go ahead and start with that A&M match because it will be the first one on their schedule. This is an A&M team that beat Minnesota, a team that beat Utah, swept them too, a team that did end up losing to both SMU and TCU, but like you said, those losses aren't bad losses whatsoever. Yes, they did get swept by an SMU team that is in the top 10, but this A&M team is going to come out ranked, and they're a team that has consistently frustrated Sullivan and this Mizzou Tigers team. You think back to last year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost positive that was the reverse sweep game. It was
not only was it a reverse sweep, but they were this close to finishing the deal in set number 3. A&M is able to come back in that set. They come back in the match. That was a shocker. Mizzou looked like they were about to win that one, and then they get reverse swept. They were going to win in dominant fashion. So I think that's a win, or rather a loss, that they're probably going to have in the back of their minds as they play that match. This is probably going to be one where they're looking for revenge against a very, very good A&M team. Last year, Aggies made the Sweet 16, had a match against Wisconsin in the Sweet 16, and very, very nearly knocked them off. Returns basically everybody from that team, including a very good right side hitter in Logan Lednicki. And they're a very well-coached team. Jamie Morrison is the coach there, has experience coaching USA Volleyball. So make no mistake about it, the Aggies are going to be incredibly tough to defeat, and also a fairly tough environment to play in as well.
100%. You want to talk about a tone-setting match to start SEC play? That is the tone setter to set all of them. I mean, you talk about the revenge last year, the quality of this A&M team, the fact that it's going to be played on ESPN2, and again, the fact that it opens SEC play. You never want to start 0-1 in conference play. Yes, you can come back from that. It's not the end of the world, but again, when we talk about setting that tone and building momentum for a team that desperately could use to rack up wins, I mean, they get a prime opportunity to pull a 3-game winning streak heading into SEC play, but it's how can you continue to expand upon that, especially as you head into the Lion's Den of Texas, which that game will be, I mean, you can talk all day about it, but this is a Texas team that is in the opposite spot of Mizzou and is wanting their own revenge. So,
yeah, Mizzou getting the massive win last year in Austin. This Texas team, it looks very different from last year's. That being said, you know that they're going to be looking for revenge. It's going to be in Austin, and Texas, outside of TCU and maybe even including TCU, has been one of the best teams in the country over the last 2 weeks. There's a reason that they are toward the very, very top of the AVCA Top 25 pool. Number 2, they've had win after win after win against top 25 opponents. Recently, Arizona State, they took down Stanford in 5, beat Wisconsin and Creighton, swept both of them to begin the season. Also beat Louisville. So you're talking about a team that has taken on top 25 opponent after top 25 opponent after top 25 opponent, and they have answered the call every single time. Texas, without a doubt, is back. They are a national title contender, and that is going to be a very, very tough match for the Tigers.
I will take it one step forward. I think they are a favorite. Maybe not the favorite, but a top 3 favorite, I think, heading into the postseason. That's a long ways away.
Outside of Nebraska, it's got to be Texas. Right now, there is a clear number 1, there is a clear number 2, and then there's pretty much everybody else.
Texas and TCU are also facing off. we're recording this on Tuesday, so they face off on Wednesday, so that will be an interesting tone setter as well to see a team that has directly played both Mizzou and Texas heading into that match on Friday night, which is really funny that it's on SEC Network Plus, considering it's a top 25 matchup, especially because last year I think it was on either SEC Network or ESPN2, but semantics. These two are arguably two of the four best teams in the SEC outside of Kentucky and Florida, and you opened with both of them on the road. You couldn't ask for a worse scheduling start to SEC play. It doesn't get any tougher than this Texas doubleheader. So there's no shame in going 0-2 to start. Like, on paper, that's probably what you'd expect from Mizzou, especially with these both being road games. But like I said, when you want to talk about momentum and you want to talk about projection of a team, if they can manage one of these big wins, that is going to leapfrog them super well, especially as you head into an SEC schedule that definitely calms down afterwards. You face Arkansas, Oklahoma, then you have to go to Florida, but then you get teams like Auburn and Ole Miss and LSU. No slouches by any means, but not the cream of the crop that you start with the two Texas teams.
And you can tell the AVCA voters have generally liked what they've seen from Mizzou, given that Mizzou stayed in the top 25 after losing to both Stanford and TCU. So if you go 1-1 on that road trip, you're probably moving up in the poll, and that's also going to give you a signature win for your tournament resume. That's something that Mizzou had last year in that win against Texas in Austin, and that's something that I think they have several opportunities to get and are really, really going to want this year for a team that has the potential to host the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament.
When you talk about hosting, I definitely think they're going to need that signature win, and I think they've got three more chances to do it. It's either A&M, Texas, or Florida on the road, which we will talk about as that match gets closer as well.
And
but other than that,
Kentucky match at home.
True. We'll see. Also, like, Kentucky appears to be very solid right now, but again, things change and move, and that's also a home match, which, again, you know how resumes work. It doesn't mean as much. So it could be
I will say I had Kentucky ranked third in the country entering the season, which was higher than some people, but I think that they've got a really good 1-2 punch at hitter with Brooklyn DeLay and Eva Hudson, the Purdue transfer. And I think right now, I think Texas is the favorite in the SEC, but outside of Texas, I think you've got to say Kentucky is the second best team in the conference and a team that took Nebraska to 5 just a week or two ago.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as Kentucky continues to like stockpile wins, which I no doubt they will, that match will again be that last opportunity for a signature win. You'd love to get one of those three on the road, especially because once you get to Kentucky, that's crunch time. That's when you're really running out of time because they only have 2 matches before the SEC tournament after that. But other than that, looking forward to some relaxing, non-televised volleyball this weekend as the team kind of rests up and gets a vibe heading into SEC play. Any other final thoughts from you, Matthew?
I think that the last week has shown us that the ceiling for this team is higher than we thought. The floor is also lower than we thought. There are a lot of things right now that are up in the air for Mizzou, but if you can get the talent to come together and development coaching, getting the most out of the roster has been one of the hallmarks of the Dawn Sullivan era in the first 2 years. If you can do that again, if you can develop the players in the team like we saw last year, this season, you're looking at a team, like we said, that has the potential to be very, very good and make a very deep run in the tournament.
Thank you so much for listening to Over the Nets. We will be returning the interview portion of this series. Hopefully that will start soon next week. The guest is to be determined. And then 2 weeks from now, we will be looking at, hopefully, the full crew for the first time. No more food poisoning. And schedules will align. But once again, thank you so much for listening to Over the Net. We will see you on the next episode.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.